I do think, when it comes to goat milk contains every digestive enzyme. So it's basically the easiest digested product really on earth.
So we're essentially helping the body regain balance or homeostasis by using these types of food products and helping it make it easier to digest the food.
I think it's really cool to look at the innate part of diets and see what they bring to the table before we look at supplementations. We know that probiotics and good yeast have a synergistic relationship. We know that good yeast actually supports probiotics in the gut.
So first off, I wanted to introduce my amazing guest here. A lot of people know who he is, but for anyone here who doesn't know who Billy Hoekman is, you are going to want to follow him and listen to all the things he has to say. And Billy is the Vice President of Nutrition and Communication for Green Juju. He's involved in formulation, product development, working with farmers, science education, and sales and marketing. And he participates frequently in expert panels and speaks nationally and internationally in venues ranging from universities and conferences to public libraries. He also serves on the board of directors for multiple organizations, attends AFCO meetings, and has numerous published articles. He's also a trusted pet health advocate that specializes in turning hard to understand nutrition concepts into plain English, which we all definitely need. So he lives in Lancaster, Pennsylvania with his wife, Emily, their really adorable daughter, Maple, and their really cute dog, Huckleberry. So Billy, I'm really excited for you to join me today. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to help us learn a little bit more about how we can use whole foods to really treat this frustrating yeast product that so many pet parents are dealing with.
Yeah, I think it really, well, number one, I wanted to say I can tell whenever people like say I'm from Lancaster, I can always tell, like, when I moved here, I had to learn how to say it, which is
Did
like,
I say it wrong?
which is like Lancaster. So that's
Oh,
how to do it. So because I moved
Lancaster.
here and I was like Lancaster, and people are like, no, get out of our town.
Well, I'm definitely not from there, so I just
So,
established that.
so and then
I'll work on it for next time.
if you really want to make people mad, you put a D in there as well, and then that's
Oh,
just they just throw
perfect.
you out of the town. So but no, it's very awesome to be here. And one of the reasons that I sort of was inspired to look more into yeast issues. I mean, I've been dealing with yeasty dogs for, and helping people for, over 10 years. But one of the reasons I was looking into this was I have a French bulldog that you mentioned named Huckleberry. And Huckleberry is a third generation raw fed dog. So he is completely naturally reared and raised, and was born on a farm and was inoculated with all this wonderful microbes and healthy yeast. And he still was dealing with a yeast issue. So that will just tell you, in terms of genetics and, well, French bulldogs in general. And so I had to, put my thinking cap on again and work with him specifically. Not to say that this exactly what we're going to talk about today is exactly what I do for Huckleberry, but remember, it's important to feed the dog that's in front of you, and to work very specifically with your own dog in terms of diet. And so I kind of wanted to give people some ideas and maybe some different whole food and nutrition concepts when it comes to yeast, because there's a lot of things going on and protocols, and very good protocols and things that work and that sort of thing. I tend to defer to, Mother Nature on most things in terms of, not really, the micro part of nutrients, but the macro part of whole foods and how those nutrients sort of go together.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too is with my dog is eating a plant, so that's good.
He's self-selecting right now.
I'm at a co-working space and I'm like, dude, don't
You're like, can I
don't
make
give
sure
me
that this is
just give
healthy?
me
Yeah.
1 second. I'm gonna put the
No
plant up
worries.
on the table.
Sounds good. And I love what Billy just said as he's making sure his dog's not eating a toxic plant, is that rather than that micro looking at things where we're like focused on what one supplement, what one herb, we're looking at like whole picture here and the synergistic properties of using whole food as truly as medicine. So I love that you said that.
Okay, I'm back and very professional. So that's good, but I think everyone can understand that
We all have animals, we get it.
part of it. Um, so the first thing I'll sort of intro here is that one of the things that I'm debating when I should share the screen on this or not, but so actually it'd be just a good time to do it now. Let me just pull this up here. So one of the things I want to sort of like go into first is how to, so this is really a method of helping to control yeast through two different means through, and this is really, a lot of this is going to be achieved through fermentation, but also through medium chain fatty acids, which, you know, a lot of people are used to dealing with, you know, in terms of some of these, in terms of some of these, in terms of some of these things like coconut oil and, you know, the MCT oil and that kind of stuff. But I want to first kind of show you what this looks like coming from food and unprocessed food. And then I want to give you guys an example of what this might look like in terms of the diet. So for instance, for huckleberry, I did a sort of following some of the things in this protocol and what it would be in regards to that. So, so the first thing to start is this. So Green Juju actually offers a full fat raw goat milk. So this is very, very important. So we're going to actually combine goat milk, which we'll talk about why in terms of fat. That's very, very important, with kefir. So the only way really in the pet food industry that you're going to be able to get a full fat goat milk with kefir fermentation is through using Green Juju products. And so first we'll start with the fermentation part of this. So when you ferment milk, which, you know, is really the easiest type of fermentation you can do. We have a video on our website which kind of explains how to ferment milk. Most people, when they go into fermenting kefir, they make it harder than it really has to be. So they think to themselves, I have to get kefir grains, I have to keep those grains alive, I have to do sifting, I have to do all this stuff. You can do that if you want to, and you can produce a really nice kefir doing that. Or you could just inoculate it with powdered kefir starter, which I think is really the easiest way to do it. And you can get a really, really great product. So you can order that really anywhere and just follow the instructions on the packaging. So at this point, you're just buying, you know, Green Juju raw goat milk and using the instructions on the packet, and then following basically the method on our the video on our website, which is to leave it on your counter at room temperature for 24 hours.
Really quick, Billy.
Yeah.
When you're looking at, because you said you can get the powdered kefir from anywhere, are there specific things you're looking at when you are buying that? Because I know that will probably come up as a question, like sourcing wise, or do you look at specific things or how they're?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely. Well, you know what? Actually, the number one thing I look at is because it depends on the actual starter, but, you know, it's good to get like a diversity of different types of cultures there. But I really look at reviews as the number one part of that, because you want to see if it's actually working for people or not, because obviously it's kind of the Wild West when it comes to, you know, the cultures and the inoculating on that. But you can also look for all of the you know, all of the standard sourcing points, you know, that you look for in food as well. But it's pretty simple. I mean, it's pretty hard for companies to screw up just, you know, getting these cultures into that. So this is going to be a really easy ferment. And then the second thing is, when you do this ferment, you only have to buy the cultures once. So the next time you do it, just take out your quart of Green Juju goat milk, pour in some of your last batch, leave it on the counter for 24 hours, and you can do that forever. In fact, in my case, I'm being really nerdy right now with my own yogurt and family's yogurt by combining a bunch of different sources and making this kind of heritage crazy thing. But you don't have to do that. You can, because we're doing kefir here. So this is going to be a really, really important part of that controlling yeast part of the diet. Now, I know a lot of people are concerned about fermentation and production of histamine, but I can tell you in the last 10 years in dealing with animals with yeast issues and working with fermented items, I don't really see a correlation there. This is because your body has a specific system that deals with histamines from food. And as long as you're not on an MAOI medication, and the I stands for inhibitor, which inhibits that system, in my experience, you don't really, the benefits of fermentation far outweigh the any negatives from that. Now it does go down to the individual animal, but so raw goat milk, the first thing is the kefir bacteria. So when you're dealing with bad yeast, I really think there's two important things here. The first thing is to inoculate the system with good yeast. So kefir is a specific ferment that is going to inoculate the milk with good yeast. And it's just like when you're dealing with probiotics, it's just like dealing with fermentation in general. You want to inoculate the gut with a bunch of good yeast to crowd out that bad yeast, because there's only a certain amount of, which is really the whole premise of fermentation, and it works in the gut as well. So you want to inoculate that with as much good yeast as possible. Now you're going to have varying amounts, but I would say on average, you're going to get about 1 billion CFUs of good yeast per ounce of any good kefir, especially over time. It's like the worst phrase ever. It's called backslopping. But once you've backslopped, a bunch of times in a row and just keep adding from the last batch, those cultures are going to become more and more acclimated. And, you're going to get a really good ferment on that. And when you open it up, you shake it up, you open it up, it's going to smell like bread. And that's what you want. That's all of that wonderful good yeast. But also you'll notice on here, it's a notable source of 200 species of probiotics as well. So you're going to have usually at least 1 billion per ounce of those probiotics as well. We know that probiotics and good yeast have a synergistic relationship. We know that good yeast actually supports probiotics in the gut to help them grow and thrive more. So it's really kind of going back to that whole food thing, and you really get a twofer there when it comes to that aspect of it. And 1 billion per ounce is definitely, a very good amount, especially when you're talking about a naturally fermented product versus obviously you can get much, much higher counts if you're using like a supplement or something like that, which we'll talk about, how you can interject that as well. But this is truly where, the good yeast and the good bacteria are really the first part of this. And then the other part too is we know that medium chain fatty acids, MCTs, in food products really help to destroy bad yeast. And so we know that coconut oil, and there's some really good brands of coconut oil, like Cocoa Therapy, is absolutely incredible, is a really great source, and coconut in general is a really great source. But a lot of people don't know is that a lot of those fatty acids are actually named after goat breeds because they were discovered in milk first. And goat milk is very, very rich in particularly capric acid, caprylic acid, and lauric acid, which are all very, very good at destroying that bad yeast. You'll notice here that our raw goat milk is going to have on average, obviously, milk is natural food product, so it's going to vary slightly depending on what the goat ate, the season, all that kind of stuff. But it's going to have on average about 274 milligrams per ounce of the medium chain fatty acids. You may be saying to yourself, that doesn't seem like that much. But when we talk about the protocol, you'll see exactly the sort of difference that can make in terms of doing that. So it's really, for me, goat milk is really the best 1-2 punch when it's fermented with kefir, because you have all of those medium chain fatty acids that are going to help to destroy that bad yeast. And then you have the good yeast there to inoculate the gut and crowd out that bad bacteria as well. So that's kind of like the base of this protocol. You'll notice on the left-hand side of this here, The protocol is very, very simple. So it's half of the dog's diet as raw goat kefir and half of the dog's diet as whatever else you're doing. And I'll show you exactly too how you can incorporate other things, especially Green Juju products, into daily feeding in the next slide when we talk about that. But there's also some other really good sources of the things that I'm talking about where you can do some extra supplementation. Like if you're looking at the triplex MCT oil from Cocoa Therapy or their coconut oil, obviously you can see you get a lot of bang for your buck when it comes to those medium chain fatty acids in terms of doing that. Now, when you go to the notable sources of probiotics, one of the things we'll talk about too is, our products, BAMS Beets and Lewis Fermented Golden Paste, which are two fermented products that me and Kelly developed that are wild fermented. And so what's really cool about that is you are going to get naturally occurring species of probiotics that change in every pouch that you use, but you're also going to get those wild yeasts. And both of those, in both of the production steps for that product are done on a farm.
Awesome.
And so you're going to be getting, and both of them are done on polyculture farms. So you're going to be getting all of those wild yeasts as well. And this is really the future, in my opinion, of probiotics is these naturally occurring soil-based probiotics. So I didn't put an amount there because, we're not going to, this is going to change every time as a natural product to be able to do that. So that's really the exciting part. So Huckleberry is now barking at an air vent. So he's very mad at, which is funny because I go to this co-working space. He's never barked here before, but
he's excited about soil-based probiotics.
He was just waiting. He's like, this is what I eat. I know all about
He's like, it's great. It's really nice.
Exactly. So the other product I talk about a lot, which is a human-based product, is Cocoa, which I think is really, my daughter loves it. I just think it's a really easy way to get more of these whole food-based probiotics into your dog's diet. And it's basically just a raw coconut yogurt. But you can see here, because it's made of coconut, it's going to have on average about 202 milligrams of those medium chain fatty acids. And it really is a great ferment. You'll see it come out of the jar sometimes a little bit, like rise up, because they get about 12 billion CFUs per tablespoon. Now it doesn't, it's a proprietary blend, but I always, I think it's a great probiotic, as well as, other probiotics that could be used with this as well would be the Adored Beast probiotics, which are really amazing. So you could ferment the milk with kefir, and then you could use the Adored Beast probiotic, and then you could be getting some more bang for your buck there. So
are there specific, do you use like the Phytos Flora with the Adored Beast product, or there's like love bugs, or does it?
I would probably rotate between them, because even in this protocol, yes, you're getting a bunch of yeast here, but the name of the game is differing probiotics as well. And then the last thing too is that you can add to this is a really good Saccharomyces boulardii supplement. So I mean, I'm doing this right now with Huckleberry, which is working very well, along with a lot of the other tenets of what we're talking about here. And that is going to typically be one source. Now, you could be really nerdy like myself and maybe get two different sources, because every brand's going to have like their patented version of it, and it's going to be a little bit different. So you could do whatever you want on that, but that can also, especially if you're dealing with just getting over the hump with the yeast as well, to supplement with that along with this protocol to kind of inoculate with a bunch of yeast, like let's say 10 billion per supplement serving or something like that. So if you're doing that on top of what we're talking about here, and keep in mind, yeast die-off is a thing, and you definitely can see that, it can definitely get worse before it gets better. But, in those cases, working with a holistic veterinarian and kind of pushing through and doing some things help as well, I think, in terms of doing that. So this is, when I say the yeast protocol is 50% milk and 50% raw goat's milk kefir, that's the base caloric part of the diet. So I think a lot of people understand that when you're building a diet, when I'm building my dog's diet at home, I build the base of it from the things that actually have a lot of calories. And then I add the other things that don't, that Green Juju has. Our vegetable blends, the BAMS beets, the fermented gold, all these things, which we'll talk about in a second, which can help in terms of doing a protocol like this to it. So those things are not any less important. They just don't have very many calories. So you have to base first the calories, because that's really how I advocate people feeding their animals. Like a good example of that is, and actually that's a pretty good, and by the way, if you're watching this, this would be a good time to moving on to screenshot this if you're, wanting to keep any of these amounts or anything like that. And I have a lot of fun researching this and breaking down the fatty part of this. But I would be remiss if I did not mention as well that just in general, because we talk about in the case of goat milk, it's about 54% of those medium chain fatty acids, saturated fats. So milk is a majority saturated fat, but it is very interesting to me that milk is the most fat diverse fat on the planet and has over 400 different fatty acid types. And we don't even know what they all do. We just know that they're good and they do something. And so I think that's really cool and exciting. And I think there's a lot more kind of cool science going on with that. But it makes sense because it's what keeps babies alive, exclusively.
Yeah. I was going to ask you real quick too, because I know not everyone can get goat's milk. Like, are they able to use, I know cow's milk, they can tolerate a lot less potentially or have more reactions to, and depending on the type of cow's milk also can play a part. But is there any recommendations for people that can't source goat's milk?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, most people, I will say most people probably can, because we're sold, in most places, unless you're in a different part of the world or something like that, which is definitely possible.
This person's Canada, and I'm not
sure. Canada's not a huge fan of raw milk for sure. Yes, I would recommend if that's the case. So cow's milk does have medium chain fatty acids, but it just has less. And so I would then supplement with more, with maybe, the cocoa therapy or something like that, on top of doing that, because that would give you that would kind of help prop up that milk, and make sure it's A2.
Yep.
Predominantly Jersey cow milk. I always brag about this, but I have a milkman in Pennsylvania who delivers my raw milk products once a week to my house, so it's very exciting for me. So you see here, so this is an example I did of what Huckleberry would be getting on this protocol. Now, the way that I feed my dog specifically is Huckleberry gets 700 calories a day. And I typically just know, okay, this particular food is 58 calories an ounce, and raw goat's milk is 20 calories an ounce. So the way that I usually do his diet is, in this case, I would just say, I know he gets 350 calories per meal, and then I would divide that by 2. You get 175, and you divide that by 20. That's 8.75 ounces of goat milk a meal. So that's kind of how I would recommend. I think once you understand how many calories your dog needs and understand, like, oh, my food that the commercial raw food I use or whatever it is 58 calories an ounce, and this is this. It allows you to have more freedom to just choose between different items. But in this case, it really helps to be able to do that. So in this case, 700 calories is 6 ounces of raw food and 17.5 ounces of Green Juju's raw goat milk kefir. So that would be, and a lot of people are looking at this and saying, wow, that's a lot of liquid. It is definitely a lot of liquid, but it is where I've seen the best results in terms of, turning some of these issues around as well. So this Huckleberry is about a 25-pound French bulldog. So that's kind of where this would sit. I also want to encourage people too, if for some reason you couldn't make exactly this happen, just do as much milk, as much of the raw goat's milk kefir as you can. And then, it doesn't always have to be all or nothing. And also something else might work for your dog better. So that, I would say cat, but like good luck getting a cat to do a protocol of any kind.
I got 3 of them. I can agree with that.
Yeah, so get as close as you can to be able to do that. But and so with this sort, and for those people saying like, well, is this complete and balanced? That's kind of a whole different can of worms, having worked for a long time in complete and balanced and AFCO and that kind of thing. But I just want to say for the record that milk is the most, complete and balanced food on the planet. And so when I formulate Huckleberry's diet, milk wise, I replace milk for complete and balanced raw diets as much as I want to, because I consider them to both be complete and balanced foods. So there's also some really, really great supportive foods here, especially you notice there the Just Greens, Bailey's blend, and Golden blend. These are really, really great fiber sources for supporting those bacteria. So up to this point, we've talked about inoculating the gut with all these bacteria. Well, those bacteria need to eat and they need to thrive. And so highly recommend with this specific idea to rotate between the Just Greens, Bailey's blend, and Golden blend. That will get you 17 different plants into your dog's diet a month, and you'll have differing types of fiber and better microbiome activity. In fact, when we were at AHVMA, Animal Biome was talking about how dogs on raw diets don't have diverse enough guts, and this is a big part of that in terms of the microbiome activity. So definitely plants are I think now with research are playing a much bigger role, which just shows you that Kelly, the owner of Green Juju, was way ahead of her time in terms of advocating for plants and their use in terms of antioxidant capacity. And also it's just better to get more foods into the diet. I'm also a big proponent of sharing your own food with your dog as well. If you're cooking something, if a good example of that, my daughter eats a lot of berries and I give them to the dog. Actually, she gives a lot of berries and other various food items to the dog. Even things I don't want her to give to the dog, she does. But I'm a huge proponent of that because that's just more fiber types, more plants. But even if you're in this instance, and if you're really worried about sugar content and starch, carbohydrates, all these are low in carbs. The Golden blend is 6% net carbs, and the other two are 3%. So you can really use these at the full amount, and still, you're still dealing in that low sugar part of it to be able to do that. So this would be, and then you can just add it to the food if you want to, or not, or you can do like I do. I always like to feed bone broth first to sort of get the digestion going and get the collagen into the digestive system and be able to do that. But also it's just another way to add, a different type of moisture set with a really good, mineral trace element, collagen base. But if it's too much liquid, you can just go with the kefir as well. And then on here, obviously I have the 2 teaspoons of the BAMS beets and or Lewis fermented golden paste. You can kind of do that however you want. And then here, this would be using 1 Saccharomyces boulardii supplement, which would be, a specific form of good yeast. And so so within this, so first of all, with this specific one, just throwing it out there, this would be just looking at the numbers here and knowing about the fat to protein ratio in milk, this would be about a 2-to-1. If you're talking about caloric ketogenic diet, what I mean by that is it's going to be about the same amount of protein to fat. And obviously fat carries almost double the amount of calories that protein does. So that's kind of the range I sit in with my own dog. Your dog is completely different. So whatever food you use, let's say your dog eats a lower calorie raw food, that works totally fine with this. It'll just be more food, in the food category of this. So, and I think that's important too, because I want to throw this idea out there as much as possible that we understand that humans' diets can be very different, and it's what works for your body and you can thrive, but we don't really apply that to dogs and cats. And there's too many arguments online about, which is why I don't engage in them, which is about things like everybody has to be this to fat to protein ratio, and it has to be meet this balance, classification. It has to be AFCO or NRC, and it has to be, plants. We shouldn't use plants, or we should use plants. Every dog is different in as drastic of a way, in my opinion, as people. I eat, my diet, I eat 3 raw egg yolks every day. I don't think that's going to work for everyone, but it's what works for me. And somebody's diet might be a lot more plant-based, and that might be a better thing for them. So it just really depends. But I think we should be talking more about that. So you'll see here with this specific formulation on the probiotic front, you're getting at least 17.5 billion from that milk in there. So now you can see where you'd say like, oh, 1 billion per ounce. Okay, that's a pretty good amount. But now you're getting up, that's a 25-pound dog, and that's at least 17.5 billion, because you're also going to get the wild fermented soil-based cultures from the BAM's beets and Lewis fermented golden paste as well. So not only are you getting that 17.5 billion, but you're also getting them in many, many hundreds of different species. And so that's also going to be very important. It's something you just don't get from a probiotic supplement, is all of these hundreds of different species there. And it's just, for me, it's just really cool that, you can do this kefir ferment, and you can do different bottles of Green Juju goat milk, but they're going to have differing cultures in every bottle. And then the same thing with the BAM's beets and the Lewis fermented golden paste. So it's almost like rotating through those different things. So with the friendly yeast, again, you're getting at least that 1 billion per ounce. So that's a lot of friendly yeast there. Now the total here would be at least 27.5 billion. And this specific supplement I was looking at would be 10 billion of the Saccharomyces boulardii. But then you're getting more of that wild yeast as well, and that naturally occurring yeast from the kefir culture that you use to ferment the milk. So again, we go back to that synergistic relationship between good yeast and good bacteria, and good yeast supporting and helping. So now you have this really nice influx of good bacteria, and you have an even greater influx of good yeast to help crowd out that bad yeast, and to also support that good bacteria. And then the last thing on here too is the MCTs, those medium chain fatty acids. If you just do the milk portion of this, you're not supplementing with anything else, you're going to get at least 4,795 milligrams in this for Huckleberry's diet per day. And that's a lot of that's at that point getting close to, or is really a supplemental amount as well. So you're getting, now you could increase that by adding the cocoa, or you could add the MCT oil or whatever you want to do for that. But the cool thing is these are all naturally occurring in the diet itself. And that's kind of where I sit, is I look at, I'm a huge nerd. I don't know if you know that, but it's true. I have like a spreadsheet, and I could go with Huckleberry's diet. I could go like, oh, this is how much, of X nutrient he's getting. And so for me, it's fun to be like, oh, let's look at all the naturally occurring stuff that's happening in this diet. And then adding up, what that is per day. And so this is kind of like a little microcosm of my little feeding sessions with my dog, which sometimes he's like ridiculous. Like sometimes I'll give him, when I give him the bone broth, he just walks over to it and he's like, oh, I don't really want this today. And it just walks away. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like,
but that's like what he wants that day, right? And you probably don't, worry that there's something wrong. I mean, you might think like what you said, what's wrong with you? This is really good food, but he's like selecting what his body kind of needs or wants that day too. And I think that's important, because a lot of like pet parents get really, really worried if they don't want something like this. And I think too, a key point that you mentioned also that I love about this protocol is the variety and like rotation. So they're not just getting like tired. Some dogs and some cat, especially cats, can get tired of the same thing every single day too. So I like that variety aspect that you mentioned, and some of the amazing products that you have from Green Juju that you can incorporate in.
Yeah, that was a much healthier way to look at him not eating than I presented.
Did you go the route most of us do? Like I say that and my cats like won't eat their food. And I'm like, what's wrong with you?
No,
But
I find myself to be kind of like, if he doesn't eat something, I'm like, all right, well, you don't get it then. That's fine. And I just,
yep.
pick it up. So I was like, you were born on a farm, you're fine. So um,
I'll just go and eat that plant in the corner, right?
yes, exactly. That's now up on the table, so that's good. Um, so yeah, I mean, when you look at this as a whole, I really like I think it's really cool to look at the innate part of diets and see what they bring to the table before we look at supplementation. So supplementation is a good thing and helps in certain cases, but let's look at what's naturally. It's kind of like this raw food here is a 1 to 2.5 omega-3 to 6 ratio. So you're already going to be getting like this portion here is going to be like, just off the top of my head, like 800 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids. So great. And then you could look at other parts of the diet with the milk. Raw milk is typically on average about 28 milligrams of, so let me do some math here. It's about 28 milligrams of omega-3 per ounce. Now that might not seem like that much, but when you times that by 17.5, that's another 490 milligrams of omega-3 plus that 800. So this is already over 1200 milligrams of omega-3 just in the diet. So now we don't even maybe have to look at, and it's also about ratio versus amounts total, right? So this is all going to be, and another thing too, for those of you watching, goat's milk is a 1-to-1 omega-3 to 6 ratio when it's raised correctly, and cow's milk as well, when they're eating all grass and that kind of thing. So so let's look at that before we go into supplementation, because now if I were to just blindly add an omega-3 supplement, am I doing too much? Potentially. So it just really depends on that aspect of it. So that's kind of how this works in terms of it. I do have one more slide, and it is by far the most important slide of this presentation. It is incredible. So clearly I had to include this. These are my inspirations here. This is my daughter Maple, and her first food was fish eggs, so she's very bougie. And they're about the same age. Maple's 18 months, and Huckleberry is about to turn 13 months. So, or no, 14 months. So there you go. So I obviously had to include these two because these are my inspiration when it comes to, product development, nutrition, nerdiness, and that kind of jazz as well. So
I love that. It's
I
so
will.
important.
Yes, exactly. We need that. And it was kind of funny because after Lua passed away, not this last August, but the August before, we really didn't know when we were going to get another dog, and Huckleberry just kind of fell into our laps, but he's been really great. He's definitely that sort of like rough and tumble boy dog that we wanted, and he's a little crazy sometimes, but it's very adorable because now Maple, when she wakes up, she'll go Hucky, Hucky, and look for him. So can't ask for more than that. So with that, I can take any questions.
So in terms of, I think Billy, this is a really good question about, I can use either raw cow's milk or pasteurized goat, which is better, or should I vary it?
I would always just defer to raw milk, just
Okay.
because when it comes to pasteurization, you're just not going to get nearly as many of the benefits. You're going to denature. The thing I didn't mention was goat milk has every known digestive enzyme. So you're going to denature all the digestive enzymes. You're going to kill all those native bacteria, you'd still get the yeast culture from the fermentation, but you kill all those native bacteria. And then also all the vitamins, depending on the vitamin, the specific vitamin, are greatly reduced. Milk is just a very fragile food, and to put it at such high temperatures is just something that's not a great idea. So I would defer to that, either raw in whatever case you do.
Yeah. And this is another kind of along that lines. Can't get raw goat milk where I am. Unfortunately, it's restricted in a lot of places, especially overseas. So Billy, you just talked about the pasteurized goat milk, though. Wouldn't it be better to see if you could get raw cow's milk?
That would definitely be better, or I would probably just avoid it altogether and then just use some of these. Now, let's say you took a really great commercial raw food that's low in carbohydrates, and then you added some of the MCT oil to it. You added the Saccharomyces boulardii, and then maybe you could get, the raw coconut yogurt or something like that. That would be another way you can kind of do this. There are definitely ways to do this without the milk. I think that's really the most efficient way, but I think really just reducing those carbohydrates, giving them, if you're in another country and can't get obviously the Green Juju blends, giving them vegetables of some kind to feed those probiotics. And then the real premise here is the good yeast, probiotics, and the MCT fats to kill the bad yeast. So when you know that premise, and that's, I think, the most important part, is to know nutrition versus know a specific subset or brand, right? And once you know that premise, then you could use some other methods to achieve that, I think.
Yeah, I love that too. I find people hear something and they have to throw something at it and they forgot about why they're doing it. Like knowing why you're doing something and how something works is very important. So for pets that are sensitive to fats, so like if they're sensitive to the MCT oil, or they're prone to things like pancreatitis or GI upset, and they have a yeast issue, which is very common in a lot of these, IBD patients, or, an immune dysregulation issue, what would you recommend for, would this be where you'd go to like a caprylic acid supplement? Or, I mean, that's typically where I would tend to go, but do you have a specific way that you would handle that for these?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways. No, number one, I think that, in general, pancreatitis is more of a result of high carbohydrate diets with fat or sudden fat. And I think that's kind of where the newer research is showing that. The story you always hear is, oh, it was Thanksgiving and my dog got turkey fat and it went into pancreatitis. Well, that's probably because they were on a high carbohydrate diet their entire life and their pancreas is stressed every day. And then all of a sudden, here's this huge amount of fat coming into it. So I do think, when it comes to goat milk contains every digestive enzyme. So it's basically the easiest digested product really on earth. And so I don't think you'll have an issue there. You could start out slowly and kind of work your way up to doing that. But when it comes to the liver, the pancreas, the kidney, the digestive system in general, you really don't have to do very much work to digest milk because it contains all those innate enzymes and bacteria and, in terms of that. So I think that that's definitely still a solution. But yeah, if you had to go to a smaller amount of something that's more fine-tuned, like a caprylic acid supplement, I think that would be a great idea as well. But I find that most dogs who are sensitive to fat, when they get on a species appropriate diet, that sort of goes away because they're not dealing with all of that sort of, what you get from, kibble diets and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And another question, does all this liquid create a very soft stool?
No, not typically. I think they'll actually poop a lot less
Because they're absorbing it, they're digesting it.
Yeah, and there's also just less, there in terms of doing that. And I also don't think that they it would depend on the dog, but I think that they get used to it and that they're not like peeing, all the time or anything like that. But I mean, I've seen, that's the other thing too, is depending on the food, what you see as a normal stool or the amount of times your dog poops is going to be totally different. So a good example of that, this is not going to be the case using half, but I've dealt with dogs on whole, just raw milk and water diets for years. Like what I mean by is dogs being on them for years. And those dogs, some of those dogs only pooped once every 3 days, and it was totally normal. Some of those dogs had like a weird, this is going to get kind of gross, but that's who we are as people. Some of those dogs would have yellowish, just kind of like paste like stools, and that was totally normal and healthy for what they were doing.
Yeah, kind of like babies, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
don't have a newborn baby, but from what I've heard from friends and family, I mean, that's common, right? When you're feeding, when they're on like breast milk.
yes, when they start eating food, you're like, thank the Lord, this is so much better. Seriously. It's so much easier to clean up, just FYI. But with this, I would expect it to because you're still getting the food is half the diet, you're still getting the Green Juju blends to provide that ample amount of fiber there, to be able to do that. I would expect the stool to be like less, but pretty much the same consistency. It might bulk up slightly, but with the milk, but it shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah. Okay. And I think this we kind of talked a little bit about, but this is a common one. My question, so I'd love to feed my dog your raw goat's milk. My question is, because she's allergic to cow's milk, do you think goat's milk would be okay?
The two things don't have any bearing on each other. And as far as I know too, a lot of the tests that they do to figure out food sensitivities and stuff are for pasteurized milk as opposed to raw milk. I've definitely seen some that have that specific notation. Not a lot of animals that have a sensitivity to either milk, but especially less on goat milk. The other thing that might make people feel better, I think, about feeding milk in general is that all milks are made of exactly the same thing. They're just in different amounts. So it doesn't matter if it's human breast milk, dog milk, camel milk, whatever the mammal is, they're all made of the same things. They're just going to be differing fat amounts, differing types of fats. Good example of that would be my daughter was on a raw milk formula recipe from about a week old, and we had to add extra whey because human breast milk has more whey than cow's milk does. So when you think about it in those terms, you get less away. You think less in terms of goat's milk is for goats and cow's milk is for cows, and this. Once they're all made of the same things, then you're like, oh, okay, I can see how other animals can digest this very easily.
Yeah, it's interesting too. There's a lot of studies on, the things that, the natural fructooligosaccharides and prebiotics and things that are in breast milk, and how they're taking it and isolating it and then using that, in an isolated form, which is what we're not talking about here. But there's a lot of studies on, okay, people need this to help, especially with GI or gut health issues too. And so when you think about, this is studies that they were talking exactly what you mentioned, where you can take human milk and feed it to animals. And these animal studies, these pets, or these not pets, but these rats were improving with gut health issues too. So, I think that's an important piece that, this is all very similar. And also, once again, bringing it back, your pet is an individual. And so all these things may not work for every single pet here. You may have to adapt it and adjust it. In terms of, is there a time frame to keep a dog on a yeast protocol? That probably goes to what I was just saying, but what would be your thoughts?
Once you do it, like, I mean, this could be a diet forever. It just depends on whatever you need to do to make your dog, I guess, normal again. In huckleberries is not exactly like this, but I will say, I'm using 2 different Saccharomyces boulardii supplements here. And regardless of what else I do with his diet, I'll probably just keep him on those because they seem to be making a big difference in just keeping the yeast at bay in regard to him just being normal. And then I can kind of vary up the diet however I want to. So you could do this forever, but if you were like, I don't want to do that much liquid forever, you could do this until it clears up and then just go back on the milk. And then maybe the goal would be to be doing a maintenance amount of milk, right? Maybe it's just, you could get them down to, on Green Juju's recommendation is I believe, I'm trying to think if that's a goat. This is really bad that I don't know this offhand, because I think I was mixing it up with the bone broth. But I think it's around 1 to 2 ounces per 10 pounds. And so you could work with the goal of, once that clears up, just getting onto the food and in a kind of a maintenance dose of, the milk, rather than having to do that forever. But it would just depend on the dog.
Yep. And can you ferment the goat milk while it's still partially frozen, or should it be completely thawed?
Has to be completely thawed. Those cultures, it will actually continue to ferment in your refrigerator. Like if you just got Green Juju milk and didn't do anything to it, you'll notice it starts to smell sour after a while. That's fermentation. It'll ferment itself. But those cultures need it room temperature or above to really thrive. If you really want to get nerdy about it, if you go to our website and go to the video there, I do recommend a specific yogurt maker that I use, for my own yogurt, raw yogurt, and to ferment kefir. And that just keeps it either at 98, 100 degrees, or I believe 104. So it's the same exact premise that you're dealing with when it's on the counter, but you're just going to get a better ferment because it's at a constant temperature that's higher. So anytime room temperature up to 110 degrees would be the highest you'd ever want to go. That's when they're going to, proliferate a lot more. And I will say this, if you start, if you do use the yogurt maker, you can get a really good ferment, especially the more you do it, and just inoculate with your next one. And it is as easy as putting it on your counter. It's just putting it into this thing and that's it.
Yeah.
But you're never going to get it as thick as like grocery store yogurt, but you can start to get really thick ferments. Just make sure when it's done, just take a whisk and whisk it up to make it smooth. But you can get some really, really good. In fact, I just sent a sample of my family's homemade raw yogurt to the lab to analyze it for bacteria. So
I love it.
I will know maybe this week how many probiotics we're getting for breakfast. So
I love it. And I feel like this is a good question, because a lot of the products that are out there, they have prebiotics with them. So like MOS, would using S. boulardii with MOS be okay? Or should you find one that's by itself without a prebiotic included?
No. Anytime there's a prebiotic in there, I think actually one of the ones I use has the MOS in there. So those are all, that's a great prebiotic as well. So again, that would just help to diversify the prebiotics between the Green Juju products and all those other things, as well as the home foods I was talking about, that kind of stuff. So that is totally fine.
Yeah. And this goes like back to the very beginning, I would think. This is a great question. How would you know if your dog or cat has a yeast condition? So this is a great question, because a lot of people assume all skin conditions are yeast related. And I think what's important for this too, if you're concerned you have skin conditions, itchiness, a lot of times pets will smell like Dorito chips. Like their feet have like a chippy smell. That can be a sign that there's a yeast overgrowth. But I feel like with this like protocol, it's so safe that you could use something like this for your dog or cat if you are concerned you are dealing with allergies. Because keep in mind, why are we doing something like this? We have whole fresh foods, we're feeding the microbiome, we're supporting optimal gut health. We know that the majority of the immune system's in the gut. So we're essentially helping the body regain balance or homeostasis by using these types of food products and helping it make it easier to digest the food. Do you agree with that, Billy, or have any other thoughts about
that? I mean, I think, connecting with a great holistic vet like yourself would be, a way to sort of get a second opinion on that. I mean, huckleberries definitely showed up in one of his ears consistently. So, that, and I definitely consulted with some of my favorite holistic vets, in regards to looking at that situation, because I was also like, is it allergies? Is it, it's hard to walk that line. But this protocol is just food, and there's nothing dangerous about it. So you could just, I mean, like I said, this would be a great diet even if your dog didn't have a yeast issue. So it really wouldn't matter. So there's no point in not trying it if you're on the fence, is basically.
Awesome. Well, Billy, we are approaching the hour. I appreciate your time and the amazing knowledge that you shared with our community today. And for everyone here, if you just joined us, it's on our Facebook page, The Natural Pet Doctor, so you can rewatch at any time. Also, if you join through Zoom, you'll get an email with the replay, and we'll share this with everyone. So that way you can continue to go back, learn, implement this with your pets. I'd love to hear how your pets are doing, and make sure that you check out that video, download that video that Billy mentioned on greenjuju.com. And I'll share some resources also with the recording to make it easier to find that information to help your pets. And for everyone who doesn't know who I am and found your way here, I'm Dr. Katie Woodley, the Natural Pet Doctor. And if you need additional help, support with your pet's care, you can go to thenaturalpetdoctor.com. We also have a better gut health program to help guide you, do some personalized testing too, so we can help resolve some of these frustrating health conditions like gut health problems or even yeast problems too. So there's a link there that you can always click through to see if that kind of program works for you too. But Billy, once again, thank you so much. And I appreciate you. And I just love connecting and talking and chatting and seeing beautiful pictures of Maple and, seeing how you're doing and, just sharing your wealth of knowledge. I truly appreciate it. You're making a big difference in the world.
Well, Maple's the important part, I feel like, but I just genuinely appreciate that, people want to come on and learn, and for me, it's just fun to do these things. And so I know one of my biggest joys in life is to be able to develop products with Kelly and to see the health outcomes. So it's just really fun for me. So thank you everyone for watching this. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes. All right. Thanks again, everyone.
All right,
We'll
cool.
see you soon. All right. Take care.
See
Bye.
you guys.